Hey everybody, Noma Langam Sally Moses here with the mochamoguls.com. I'm here with our resident personal finance expert, Dr. John Beckem. How are you doing today, Dr. Beckem?
I'm doing excellent. How you doing today, Noma?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about this topic, even though for me it's about 10 years late. Uh, but it's a great topic nonetheless. This topic is a nice follow-up to one segment that we did recently, which talked about before you do, meaning before you get into marriage, the lifelong commitment. And now this one is about before you have children. I often hear, and you can agree or disagree, that one of the biggest financial decisions that you make is actually having or not having children. So before we continue, I just want to say that everybody can find out more about Dr. Beckem at drjohnbeckem.com. You can also visit his blog, and it is at personalfinanceblueprint.com, personalfinanceblueprint.com, and you can also find the Life After Debt Institute at teachable.com. So all right, Dr. Beckem, the floor is yours. I know you have some points that we need to be aware of before we have children.
Yes, and so this topic in dealing with children is near and dear to my heart. My wife and I, exactly 7 days ago, just gave birth to our fourth child. And about the third day, I started thinking, like, okay, now what plan do I need to start putting into effect for this child? And I pretty much did that for each of my children as they were being born. But it's a good way to recap when you have a brand new one. And I said, wow, this would be great information to pass on to some other people as well.
Absolutely, and congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to cover different avenues. Now, you can do all of them. You can do some of them. You can do a combination, understanding that everyone is in different financial situations, right? And you can do as much or as little. And when I mean as much as little, I'm talking about contributions. So the first one, in thinking about my own daughter, Olivia Grace, even though she's a newborn, I want to start putting away right away for her college, understanding that college tuition is not going to decrease, it's steadily increasing. And you want to get as much time on your side as possible. With time, you get the value of time, and you also get compounding interest. Now, there are several different plans, ESA, there's educational, other plans. I personally like the 529 plan. And with the 529, you can look it up. Every state has one. But the good thing about it, you can start off small. You could do $25 a month. You could do $100 a month. But what I recommend is to have it automatically deducted from your payroll. So automatically before you get your check, it'll have that $100 a month if you get paid bi-monthly, $50 a pay period. If you get paid every single week, $25. But have it go into a 529 plan. Here are the things that I like about the 529 plan. Number one, I highly recommend that you name yourself as the beneficiary, not the child. By naming yourself as a beneficiary, you're in total control of the account at all times, and you can put the beneficiary, change the name as needed. So when that child get ready to go to college and utilize the funds, then you can switch the name to your child as the beneficiary. If that child does not go to college, then you can use it for another child. You can gift it to a niece or a nephew, or you can use it for yourself. There are plenty of adults who go back and take, professional educational classes. Within the 529 plan, you have investment vehicles, right? So you can choose how you will let your money invested. I personally like two options. Number one, my all-time favorite is the S&P 500 index fund. And basically, it just tracks the Fortune 500 companies, the top 500 companies. It invests in a little bit of each and every one of them. It also pays dividends every quarter. So if you're not stock savvy, if you're not up every day watching the stock market and understanding what's going on, this is a situation where every time you give money to the 529 college fund plan, is automatically invested in S&P 500. Historically, you get about a 9.5, 10% average return on investment. Some years it's going to be higher, some years it's going to be lower, but it's going to average out. And that's compounding interest. If you're a little bit more aggressive and you have the tolerance because you say, hey, I got 18, 19 years before my child goes away to college, so I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive and I'm going to try to maximize my investment growth, understanding that if the markets dip, I got more time to recover. You can look at a small cap fund, a small cap, looking at small companies that have the greatest potential to grow. So those two are great plans within the 529 plan. So that'd be my first recommendation, is to actually start at birth and start putting away a little bit by little bit for their college. Discipline yourself. Find that extra $100, extra $200, extra $300, or if it's just extra $25. It's better to do something than to do nothing. And let that money just grow and grow and grow for 18 years, 19 years until they go to college.
So for those of us who are, or at least who are like me, and they have kids who are already, grown, maybe not completely grown, like maybe, like for instance, I have an 11-year-old as my oldest, and I even have a 17-year-old stepdaughter. So if I hadn't already started this when my kids were born, and I was starting now, and I'm sure there's people out there who have that situation, what would be the best thing for them to do now so that they can, they won't necessarily be able to make up for 10 years or 17 years or whatever, but what's the best approach for those people?
Well, it's never too late to start. So if you even got a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, you still got a good 7 years, 8 years to accumulate money to let it grow. Because the thing is, you're using after-tax dollars. So that means that after Uncle Sam and your state have taken out the money out of your paycheck, then you're using dollars that you've already paid taxes on to invest into the 529 college plan. And so therefore, because it is a college plan, if you withdraw for college expenses, which can be books, clothes, tuition, room and board, food while you're away at college, the money that grows, so say if you put in physically $10,000 and that $10,000 grows to $50,000, as long as you use it for a qualified educational expense, you don't pay taxes on that additional $5,000 that you grew, right? You physically put in $10,000, but you grew it to $15,000 with an investment. And so, that's another great thing about the plan is the tax advantages. And if you already have an older kid, it's still better to start saving with as much time as possible versus when they get ready to go to college, now you got a total bill that's due and you haven't had any cushion to kind of prepare.
Right. And for a lot of people, that then means they go into those horrible school loans that you've warned us 100 times about.
Right. Absolutely. I personally believe that it's better to pay as you go, whether you're doing savings, college plan, whether you got a grant or a scholarship, or like I did, I worked and put myself through school. If you look at how much a student loan puts you in a hole before you even start your employment, I vehemently ask people and recommend that you avoid student loans at all costs.
Absolutely. And if anybody's been paying attention to all of the things that you say in the segments that you've done and all the instruction that you've given, I think that should be clear by now.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about investing for the child's future. You talked about the 529 or the 529, and then either going into the S&P or the small cap fund. What are the next steps? What are the other things that you would want to do to financially prepare for your child?
Yeah, so there's a couple more things. Number two, a child can take advantage of a Roth IRA, so a Roth individual retirement account. So again, and you have to have earned income. So if you have a at-home business, a small business, if you have anything that you can claim as a business, then utilize your child, and you can pay your child up to $4,000 And when they do their taxes, because they have to also do taxes, your child, which is a simple one-page 1040 easy. If they're making $4,000 or less, they don't have to pay any taxes. So you say, well, how can this be done, right? So, like for instance, my daughter, one of the things that I can utilize her for is because she's a baby, I can take baby pictures of her, and I can make that part of my marketing. So if I want to market a special program, or if I want to market my company, or if I want to market a coupon, right? I'm using her in this particular marketing, right? So you put a little onesie on her with a little beret or whatever. She looks cute. And now I can legitimately pay her for modeling, So she
Right.
modeled for my marketing commercial or advertisement. And so therefore, I'm going to pay her $4,000 for doing this. And so by taking the $4,000, I can put it in a Roth IRA. I recommend the Vanguard S&P 500. Vanguard is the institution, of course, but they also have an S&P 500. And again, it's after-tax dollars. So your child can put it in the Roth IRA and it can grow. So they can do this year after year after year, just keep putting in the money, $4,000 they don't have to pay any taxes on, but they can go as high as $5,500, which is the current legal limit for a Roth IRA. And the good thing about it, because they're using after-tax dollars, they don't even have to pay any taxes on the growth. So if over the next 20 years, there's $100,000 that you physically put in there, I'm just using numbers, right? Or just say $50,000, and it grows from 50,000 to 60,000. They can withdraw that whole 60,000 at 59.5, right? And if you begin to do the math of compounding interest, even when they turn 18, 19, 20, if they never put a dime in there, that amount of money is going to grow substantially until they reach 59.5, even if you don't put no more money. Or you can say, hey, I've done this now for 18, 19 years. I'm turning it over to you. I highly suggest you keep putting your retirement, at least $5,500 into it. If you have to do less, you do less. But it gives them a head up. Most people don't even think about putting away for retirement until they're in their 30s or 40s. And so you've already missed 4 decades of having your money compounded.
Yes.
And as a business owner, because now your child has become an employee, now you also, that whole $4,000, you can write it off as a business expense because you just paid an employee for doing a service, whether you put them on a payroll or whether you give them a 1099 for doing, one thing. So there's advantages for that as well. Again, that's earned income. So you got to find some type of way they can earn income. I like the example of being a baby model because you're a baby, you take a picture, and it works.
That's brilliant. That's one thing I've never taken advantage of. My kids actually have numerous skills because they're a little bit older, but modeling would be one great idea because it's legitimate.
If you have older kids, they can help you clean up, sweep up. You want to find something that is capable of whatever age your child is, right? You're not going to ask your 5-year-old to do, bookkeeping for you. but if you ask them to straighten up, if you ask them to draw or color something that you can have artwork that you can put up, you can be creative. As long as you can document it, it's totally legal, right? I'm never going to recommend anything that's illegal. I believe in paying your taxes, filing everything, and doing it the right way.
Absolutely, and this is a great idea. I had heard about, and maybe you can answer that. I had also heard about when you give money as gifts, which you can technically do with your own relatives. Can you speak to that a little bit as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So like, for instance, my children have 529 plans. And what I did with grandma and granddad, and aunt and uncles, I said, listen, do not buy my kids, some toys for their birthday, for Christmas that, just going to get tore up, it's not worth anything. You can send them a link in their email, or you can send it to their phone, where they actually, instead of buying a toy for their birthday or Christmas, they can give them money for Christmas or, the birthday into the 529 plan. So, relatives can also donate to your child's education. So it doesn't just have to, all the onus have to be on you and your or spouse or the parent of the child.
Right. Excellent. Great information.
Yeah.
So gifts also count.
Now, now, so here's another thing. So
Mhm.
someone might say, well, I don't have a home business or a small business. What else can I do? So I
Mhm.
say, here's something else that you can do in addition to, or if you don't have a business, you can do as alternative. And one of the nice vehicles is called a whole life insurance policy that has a cash reserve. All
Mhm.
right. So you can take a whole life, and I specify whole life
Mhm.
insurance policy. Now, don't get it variable because you don't want it. You do not want it being placed into the stock market, right? Because there's
Right.
different types of whole life. You can have your funds put into the market where your person can think they're going to get extra growth. If you're
Mhm.
already doing the 529, which is invested in the market, and you're doing the Roth IRA, which is invested in the market, to me, this is a way of doing some diversification.
Right.
So I'm gonna do a whole life insurance that's non-invested in the market, but still gives me a guaranteed rate of return, right? So right
Mhm.
now, most whole life insurances are giving on the low end about 3.8% interest rate, or all the way up to 7%. You know, it's based upon which company that you utilize. Now, the good thing about it, if you use a mutual fund insurance company, because there's two different types of insurance companies. There's one that's owned by stockholders, which have
Mhm. Mhm.
share investors, and then there's one that's a mutual company, whereas the policyholders are also owners of the company.
Mhm.
With the mutual insurance company, they represent the member, as well as not only will you get a return of an investment, so your savings account gives you less than 1%. Here I'm telling you of an insurance policy that not only gives you a death a burial amount, so if the worst case happened, they have money that's there for their burial, but it also gives you a cash reserve that is giving you interest as a return,
Right.
and it pays you dividends. You know, most important, it also pays you dividends. The
Right.
longer you have the insurance policy, the bigger your dividend payout becomes. So let's say, I'm just making these numbers up for an example.
Mhm.
Let's say, you have an insurance policy that has a payout of $75,000. And the money you put in, it can have a cash reserve of, let's say, 60, 70, 80,000, depending upon how you structure it, right?
Mhm.
So that death benefit of 75,000 never moves, it never changes. But that cash reserve that's building up as you keep putting more money into it as you pay your premiums,
Mhm.
you can do one or two things. That money is always available to you. So you can do a withdrawal,
Mhm.
or you can do a loan against the money that's already there. So
Wow.
again, if the stock market crashed and say your 529 plan dipped and your Roth IRA dipped, your money that's in this mutual whole life insurance, which is in the guarantee fund, that is never going to dip. That
Wow.
is the reason how Walt Disney, J.C. Penney's, Ray Kroc, that's how they were able to survive during the Depression. So when everybody else were jumping out of windows in 1929,
Mhm.
they were actually able to borrow against their own whole life insurance policies.
Wow.
This is something that your wealthy has always taken advantage of. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to disseminate this information to your everyday people, because you don't have to be wealthy to take advantage of these things.
Right.
Remember, the earlier you start off, time is on your side. So whereas a person who's older, 30, 40, 50 years old, might be trying to put $1,000 a month away, if you're starting off with a child or an infant, you might only have to put a couple $100 away, because
Right.
you got 20 years of time working on your side.
Right. Now, this is more, I guess, a family kind of question.
Yeah.
I saw earlier you said that, even if you do the 529 at some point, you want to maybe turn it over to them so they can continue. So in your opinion, is that a good idea, or is there a way to kind of protect your children from themselves? Um, they say your brain doesn't fully mature until you're 25. So giving a 25-year-old or somebody younger than 25, a big chunk of money may not always be the wisest thing to do.
Right. So on my children's 529 plans, I'm listed as the beneficiary, right?
Right.
And so when I think that they are mature, even though it's for them, because
Mm-hmm.
remember I told you the good thing about the 529, you can wait till you get ready to use the funds to switch to beneficiary.
Right.
So in the 529, um, I'm the beneficiary. I see there, Lucy.
Just 1 second. There's a break in the audio right now.
I'll make sure you still there, Lucy.
No, I'm here. You were
Okay.
just starting to
Yeah.
answer. You were just starting to
Yeah.
answer
So
about the
right. So in the
529.
so the 529 plan, you can wait to your child is about to actually go to college to switch them over to the beneficiary. If
Right.
they decide they don't want to go to college, you don't have to do it. You can keep it in your name. And like I said, you can pass it on to a different member of the family. In
Right.
regards to the Roth IRA, again, you can put yourself down as the person who's controlling the account as the beneficiary, and you can turn it over to them when you think that they're mature enough. The goal is, remember, that they want to keep it to at least 59 and a half. So when I say turning over to them, I'm talking about turning it over to them. So I'm no longer contributing to their Roth IRA. They're now have the responsibility to contribute their own money to the Roth IRA, right?
Right.
And you can use different types of wills or a living revocable trust
Mm-hmm.
to say if you want plans, right? My children, they'll get things for them while they're in college, but the bulk of their inheritance, my children can't touch until they're 40. And again, you can use a lawyer to kind of map these plans out to
Right.
when you think that your children would be ready.
Okay, that's a good. So we have a few points here, and I wasn't sure if there were going to be more points, but I have some more
Yes.
generic questions if you're done with
Yeah.
the main points.
No, let me cover two more things, right?
Okay.
And then let's go to the generic questions.
Okay.
Another good thing that, like for my children, so as an adult, I already have life insurances, right? So one of the things, and I use term life insurance. I think that's very valuable when you have small children. That's when you have the most at risk, right? Because they're totally depending upon you.
Right.
But if you just had a child or you take on a family member, call your insurance company and add your child as a rider. So my insurance policy doesn't change. That's already existing. But what I do now is call them, give them my daughter's birth date, their name, and their social security number. And now they're added as a rider onto my plan, which automatically, if something happened to them, I think it pays out $25,000 or $50,000, which is enough to cover them for burial. But that's
Okay.
something very important that you want to do. The
So
last thing that
I'm sorry, can I just
I'm
ask
sorry,
a
go ahead.
question about that in
Yeah.
particular? So if they're a rider, all your children are a rider, and can you one more time kind of help us understand you're adding them as a rider in case something happens to them or in case something happens to you or both?
No. So your insurance policy, if you already have an existing term life insurance policy, right? That policy will pay out in the event of you as a parent demise, right?
Right.
So it would pay out, right? But the rider means that whoever is listed as a rider, in this case, children, if on a child's demise, then it would pay out for the child, which is usually a lot less, right? So
Okay.
if you have a $500,000 or $1 million life insurance policy, if something was to happen to your child, it's not going to pay out the 500,000 or million because that's covering you.
Right.
It cut your rider, and it's going to stipulate in the policy, the rules. Most riders are anywhere between 25,000 and 50,000. So once you add your child on as a rider, if something was to happen to them, then the insurance company would pay you out that $25,000 to $50,000, which is really meant to cover their burial insurance, right?
Right.
If you want something more than that, say if you want a $100,000 policy, $200,000 policy, you have to get their own insurance, and that's why I was talking about utilize this whole life insurance for multiple purposes.
Right.
Number one, it's a savings account that pays you a higher interest rate, and number two is also a burial insurance that's specifically for them.
Right. Okay, good. Understood.
The last thing that I want to cover is now I did this as a novelty, but what it does is it helps me begin a conversation with my children.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought a share of stock for each one of my children, and I contacted the company and said, hey, I want a physical certificate mailed to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then I take that physical certificate and I put it in a frame and put it on their wall. So they're
Wow.
getting used to seeing a certificate. You can even put a gold or a silver coin there as well. And as they begin to get older, they're used to seeing it. They start to ask questions. Mama, Papa, what is this? And it
Mm-hmm.
begins the conversations to teach them about money, right? So I
Right.
use it as a point to begin the conversation of teaching them about money because face it, most people didn't learn about money until they were grown themselves and had responsibilities. You don't learn it in K through 12. You
Mm-hmm.
don't learn it in higher ed. And most parents don't teach their children. So these are different things to initiate the conversation, and it's of value. So for me, it's teaching them what an asset is versus a liability at a very young age.
Absolutely. I think it's almost similar to, I heard one celebrity say that when she turned 18 and she was able to vote, she was already in a family that was very politically involved, so she knew how they felt and all these other things and the things you have to consider. But she said that they really emphasized how important it was to be involved in the political process. And I think it's important to do the same thing with the financial process because, like you said, unless you're homeschooling and deciding what your kids are learning in school, they're just not getting taught how to manage money and or anything really about finances. And by the time that we learn, a lot of people, they've already made some bad decisions or formed some bad habits.
Absolutely. I taught my children learn how to count, and
Mm-hmm.
they learn, addition and subtraction. They haven't progressed to multiplication yet, but they learn how
Right.
to count, addition, subtraction. I use real money,
Right.
so I went out and got a stack of ones, $2 bills, fives, tens, 20s, 50s, 100, as well as coins, right? And here
Mm-hmm.
it is. If you get whatever I'm teaching you, if you get it right, you keep the money.
Wow.
So it incentivizes them,
Mm-hmm.
to learn, to practice. They look forward. Hey, Papa, come teach us something new about numbers because they already know I bring money to the table to teach them about numbers
Right.
because they're happy, right? So if they
Mm-hmm.
get it right, they keep the money, they get to put it in their piggy bank. The piggy bank is actually in their room, so they see it grow. But on the flip end, if they get it wrong, then they get nothing. I don't reward them for failure.
Right. Understood. Yeah, these are some really good points to put into practice right away, because, like you said, we always hear about what the wealthy are doing, and we kind of think that they're doing it because they're wealthy, but actually, it's more about what you've taught before, where it comes to money, that it really does come down to your habits, and it doesn't matter how much money you have or how little you have. You can always cultivate habits that create success.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was talking to someone today, and they have a whole life insurance, and they wealthy, and they
Hmm.
putting away $5 million a year into this
Wow.
insurance because there's no minimum and there's no maximum.
Right.
And so for $5 million a year, they only invested money for 10 years and then they stopped. So they
Right.
literally put in $50 million. That's
Wow.
it.
Wow.
Their cash value is 87 million. They only put in 50, and
Hmm.
the cash value grew to 87 million. And the death payout. So if they die,
Hmm.
the death insurance portion of it is 175 million.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
out of putting in $50 million, they can borrow or withdraw cash value of 87 million. They put in 50, but they got 87 million to work with. And
Hmm.
if they die, their beneficiaries get a policy that's 175 million dollars, and they
So,
only put in 50.
so
Now,
three and a
now that's
half
a wealthy.
times.
Absolutely. So don't get caught up with 50 million or 5 million or whatever. You could take the same numbers and you could break it down to $50, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ratios, even though it'll be a little bit less, as far as the death insurance as
A
well as
lot
how much it
less.
grows. Yeah, yeah. But you see how the compounding interest works. It is not
Yes.
tied to the stock market. So no matter what happens, a depression can hit tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you use a reputable company, and I like to, you can go out and research the top 10 mutual life insurance companies, which are going to include, New York Life, Northwestern Mutual, Guardian, Mass Mutual. These companies have triple A ratings across 4 different rating companies. They have over $500 billion in assets. So those
Right.
companies are been around for between 150 to 200 years. They're not going to fold. So,
Right.
with the guarantee, you're making right now 3.85% a year. And as the market gets better, it grows up. But you can get somewhere between 3.85 to 7%, depending upon who you choose and how you set it up. But that's your money growing year after year after year. That's not tied to the stock market. So if the market crashes, it does not affect your money.
Right. Yeah, so I thought it was important for you to point out not to fixate on the 50 million. We could take those same numbers and knock off a few zeros and do the exact same thing
Absolutely.
that the wealthy people are doing and get the exact same results, because the truth is, based on the lifestyle that you've acquired or are used to or whatever, if you do it in proportion to that, then the payout and everything else will be in proportion to, your lifestyle and what you're accustomed to.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I want to reiterate that, you could start off with something as low as $5 a day.
Mm-hmm.
It's your child. You can say, okay, I'm gonna cut $5 a day out of my expenses. I'm gonna find some way to cut, if it's a pack of cigarettes, if it's Starbucks, if it's not going out to eat as much. And I'm gonna take this $5 a day, which is $150 a month,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna use some of them, or all of these investment vehicles to plan for my children's future.
Right.
If no one planned for your future, why repeat that?
Mm. Right. Right. And the thing is, you're
You know,
living with those results, so you should know better.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. I've heard people say, "Well, my parents didn't leave me nothing, so therefore my kids got to make it the best way they can, just like I did."
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I say, well, with that type of mentality, that family would never build generational wealth.
Right.
The goal is, I'm gonna leave my children as much of a head start and as much as a foundation as possible, and then their responsibility is to add on to that foundation, right?
Right.
So you start to think about some of these families, family names that you can start to list off, and when their children are born, they automatically born multimillionaires.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't always start that way.
Right.
It was generation after generation after generation of doing things that was financially savvy and financially responsible, that
Mm-hmm.
led to them being where they're at now.
Absolutely. So the one question that I did have, which is kind of relevant to this, is I wanted to hear your take on children who work, and if they do, well, whether they should or shouldn't work, and if they do work, what they should do with that money.
Great question. So for instance, let's go back to the example of my children, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I have the option of putting $4,000 away, up to 4,000, and they pay no taxes on it, right?
Right.
Or I can put up to 5,500, and they'll pay the taxes on the 1,500, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can do that. My children are small; they can work for me, but they're not going out to work for anybody else.
Right.
Um, but in the case where your children becomes teenager, I've been working probably since I was 8, 9 years. But if you got teenagers, 13, 14, 15, they working at a fast food joint, McDonald's, or they cutting grass, shoveling snow, or whatever the case might be. Or if
Mm-hmm.
you have your own company and they're starting to work for you, doing more mature jobs. Now
Mm-hmm.
you can help them, teach them about money, and say, okay, I've been contributing this much to your Roth IRA, or to your 529 plan, or to your whole life insurance, whatever the case might be. I'm now going to also contribute this, but you're going to contribute part of your pay.
Right.
One of the things that my mother did, my mother didn't have the savviness of understanding all the financial things that I'm talking about now. But I remember from day one that I got a paycheck for working for somebody, she took part of my money, and
Hmm.
I was responsible for paying something. It didn't matter if it was a light bill, if it was part of the groceries. What she was doing was she didn't need the money, but she was teaching me responsibility, how to
Right.
take a check, look at it, see taxes are paid out. Now I also got to pay somebody. In this case, I didn't have to pay rent or nothing like that. I
Hmm.
chose the utility, but how to manage that,
Right.
understanding that if you're getting paid $10 an hour, that whole $10 is not yours.
Right.
You got to pay Uncle Sam. You got to put gas. You got transportation. You got rent. You got insurances. You got X, Y, and Z. And
Hmm.
so she taught me that. So you can also now understanding more finances say, okay, I might not do that, but I'm gonna get my children more involved into their own financial being, right? So I'm gonna get
Hmm.
them started early so they can understand what it means to start putting things away. They can also see the statements. They can see things growing as they put it away. Then
Right.
sooner or later, they'll want to do it themselves.
Hmm.
Hey, my check was $500, but I'm not spending the whole 500. I'm gonna spend 100 of it, and I'm putting the other $400 up.
Right. Right. Yeah, I do a similar thing. My kids are 11 and 8, the older two or the middle two. Are 11 and 8, and they're already working on building their own business. And then the next thing is,
Right.
using all of these tools that you're teaching us is when they start turning profits, I want them to not just have a profit to go, be spenders and consumers, to be able to take that money, reinvest it in their business, and also reinvest it in the many ways that you're teaching us. And I think that's something very valuable. 10, 20 years from now, they're going to have a very different financial future than other people, regardless. I mean, their parents will also do good things and make good decisions, but regardless of what their parents do, they'll also have contributed to that.
Absolutely. Especially, if you just focus on assets versus liabilities as a
Mm-hmm.
starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Assets is anything that put money in your pocket. Liabilities is anything that take money out your pocket.
Right.
Even with my oldest son, I can take him somewhere and say, okay, here's some money, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
you want to buy this toy that's going to be worthless, or do you want to buy a silver coin that
Mm-hmm.
you might spend $14 on today, but if you keep it a little while, it's going to be worth $17. So
Right.
you actually have more than what you started with. Now you can take that the $14, put it back in your pocket, and use the interest that you made and purchase your toy with it, right?
Right.
So you're never losing your principal. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you start off with assets versus liabilities, you can start teaching them about principle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Live off of your dividends and live off of the interest that you make, compounding interest, and never touch your principal.
Right.
This is what institution does. When you hear people say endowment funds, if you ever
Mm-hmm.
wonder what endowment is,
Mm-hmm.
that's millions of dollars they have put into account that they never spend. They
Right.
only utilize the money that they have made off of that. So if they
Right.
got an endowment of $100 million, they're not using the principal. That $100 million itself is generating millions of dollars, and so
Right.
therefore that $100 million is always going to be at work for generation after generation.
Right.
You can do the same thing on a smaller scale. So, by looking at what the wealthy, the rich have learned to do for protecting their assets, for minimizing their taxes, you can also apply these same principles at a smaller scale and slowly build up to the bigger scale.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Great information. Um,
It's not how much money you make. It's about what you have from the money that you made. If you make $100,000 a year, or just say you make $50,000 a year, and
mhm.
every year you spend $50,000 or more, if you're in credit card debt, loan debt,
Mhm.
then to me you haven't got ahead. But if you make $50,000 a year and you were able to save 20 grand out of that, you're
Mhm.
making more money than somebody who makes 100,000 and spend 98,000 of it. Because at the end
Right.
of the day, you had 20 grand left over.
Right.
So it's about living smartly. Not
Right.
living above your mean and always being in debt, but being able to maximize efficiently and productively what you have coming in.
Right. And again, it always goes back to those habits, which really have nothing to do with how much you actually have, but just what you're
Right.
doing. Right. Absolutely. Great information here. So this is actually a long segment, which I hope people will go through, take notes. I've been vigorously taking notes. And I'm going to share some of this with my husband, and he does the planning for our children, but I'll make sure that, I share this information, and I hope that people also do the same. Um, I just want to remind our audience where they can find you. On the screen, it says drjohnbeckem.com. That is your website where they can find out more about you. And then also there's a blog where, many segments like this will go there. And this is all free information. You can thank me later. I accept gifts of all kinds. Because I had to, convince Dr. Beckem to do this, and we appreciate it. So again, that's drjohnbeckem.com. You can go there to find out more about Dr. Beckem and to read the many blog posts, segments like this. Also, you can go to teachable.com, and there you can look for the Life After Death Institute, where again there's segments there. Again, there's free stuff, and then there's stuff that is going to be, courses that you'll have to pay reasonable amounts for, and that's the the Life After Death Institute. So just want to say thank you, Dr. Beckem. Always great information here that we can use. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. I'm glad to do it, and anytime I can be helpful, please don't hesitate to call me. And if your husband needs some sit down, more information, I'm happy to sit down with him as well.
Thank you. We really do appreciate it. Thank you, guys, and thank you, Dr. Beckem. Goodbye for now.